Okay, we're back. We're live here in Community Matters because community does matter. And I'm here with Carroll Cox. He's a commentator on the Carroll Cox Show on KWAI 1080 AM. Yeah?
Yes.
Welcome to the show, Carroll.
Thank you.
Nice to have you.
Thanks for inviting.
So there's lots to talk about here on a Friday afternoon. We can, sort of kick back a little bit and philosophize and ruminate about some of the events that we've seen in the paper this week. And a couple of them come to mind. One is guns. We've had more than our fill of guns this week. Mm-hmm. And gee, I tell you, I mean, every time you turn around, you know what I noticed when I read that article in the paper? I heard about it yesterday and I read an article in the paper and I said, gee, this article is written in a kind of, there's almost a blasé way. Okay, here's another gun killing for you. We have these every day. It's not like it's a surprise. It's not like, there's a shrill reaction. It's like, okay, here's another one. And that is more disturbing than any other aspect of it. We're getting used to it.
We're getting used to it and becoming numb. And I think that's the saddest event. Yesterday's event was sad because these are military people, and we've been told that the terrorist is seeking to strike at us internally. And yet we should be arming our soldiers. If we can't trust soldiers, Marines with guns, or at least some kind of protection, then we've lost something there. And we will continue to see these stories. And you're right, that the way it was written, it was as if, okay, we'll wait another 24 hours and there'll be another one.
Right, there'll be another one.
Yeah.
Just wait around, you'll see.
Yeah.
And that's very troubling because, the inherent in all of that, in the blasé aspect of it, is that we can't do anything about this. It is what it is, what it is, what it is. Congress isn't doing anything really much to speak of. I mean, the gun lobby is so powerful, even now, after all these horrendous stories, every month or less, we get another one of these murders, mass murders with guns, and Congress doesn't do anything. The gun lobby is so strong even now, amazing.
Well, the pro-gun people tend to take plays from the playbook on dealing with affirmative action. They balked at that. Now, why are you giving talk about rights? Everybody has rights. Why you need to protect one group? And you get that kind of argument. But the reality is, every day you pick up the paper, or before you pick up the paper, there's another shooting. There's another assault on a person's family. There's assault on a policeman. And you look at the internet now, the violence, people are making videos of little children fighting and whatever. So it's a violence that we haven't seen the scale of it ever in today's world. And so give them a gun, give that person a gun, and give them an easy access to it. You've escalated the problem tenfold. Like that.
What I find interesting, and maybe you've thought about it more than I have, is that in our generation, I'll put you and me in the same generation. I mean, I'm really older, but okay. We have seen an enormous amount of fictitious violence on the screen. There's a book out just called "Television is the New Television," arguing that television is actually winning the war, if you will, prevailing over the internet because television offers so much. When I call it video literature. I don't really agree with that, but that's the premise of the book. And, fact is that television does offer a lot of literature, but a lot of that literature is trash. And a lot of that literature includes violence. And this is the part that amazes me, I'm sure you will agree, that in the violent movies we see on the screen and in television, everybody always seems to walk away. They're not really hurt.
Right.
Or they go to the hospital and somehow the medical system swoops down and makes them well, virtually overnight. I love it when the guy gets, wounded, seriously wounded, and 1 minute later in the movie, he's out there in action yet again. It's as if we're all indestructible. And of course we're not, but some people see this for a lifetime of what do you want to call it, information effect on them.
Right.
And they begin to believe that they are indestructible.
Well, let me just share with you. Rat Patrol, remember Victor Morris? Gunslinger, Gunsmoke, Rat Patrol, and on and on and on. And what was the component there that resolved everything? The gun. And then whether it was rawhide or some other Western, and where people, human beings, so we've built ourselves a problem here, manufactured it through television and movies. It was the native people, the Native Indians, the Native Americans that were, at any given time, you'd see a guy sitting in with a repeating rifle, just shoot them, they're falling. Well, now we're shocked that the world is not sensitive to death and mayhem, but we programmed ourselves into receiving and accepting this, and the gun becomes a critical part of our everyday existence. That's the gun control. Start with the movies, and you know, you turn on the TV, and the first thing you got is a cop with holding a gun like this, you know, making that gun the big thing.
Macho.
Macho. And this is a solution right here.
Yeah, solution.
The bigger, the blacker, the solid, and more repeated, it's the better solution.
The nastier weapon, the weapon that can do more damage and destruction to your body, that's the one you want.
And then racking it one in the chamber.
Yeah.
How can we be shocked? Or why should we be shocked that we have all of this gun violence when we sit there and drink beer and eat, and the kids and the family and watching it every week? There's a story.
Maybe there's a new art coming, I doubt it, but maybe there's a new art coming that says, well, okay, this guy got shot. Now he's a quadriplegic, and he's going to live the rest of his life in a bed, and it's going to be a short life. You know, all of a sudden you bring in the reality, and it's, you know, it's not that he stands up or goes to the hospital and 10 minutes later he's well again. That you know, the reality is what we're missing here, and it's this fiction that I think that has misguided a whole generation, multiple generations of people to believe that guns are okay and they should side with the gun lobby.
We must be receiving the same waves because, you see, I've always thought at the end of a movie, if you're going to have gunplay and shooting it, then okay, that's the entertainment. But at the end of that, say that this was a depiction of a real life situation, this person is now a complete vegetable, or he died 6 months later, and the family ended up with a tremendous expense.
Right.
You understand? And he left a wife with 6 children or 4 children.
There you go.
Who now is, if we were just honest with ourselves, separating entertainment, but then who would want that?
No, it'd be a sad case, you know.
You wouldn't get an Emmy.
The pulp fiction always has to end on a high note, and the moral high road, ground, and the good guys always have to win, and this and that, and you know, it's like, haven't we had enough of that already?
Yeah.
So the guy who said television is the new television, I disagree with him. Television is terrible. Television is a teaching medium, and it is teaching the whole country this stuff. It's a bad lesson.
Life imitating art.
Yeah.
Art imitating life.
Art creating fictitious
right,
life.
Exactly. And we've heard this story, but you can equate this to the same type of activity. Guys in a skating rink. You see now everybody got a GoPro on. It was the gun that put people in harm's way because they have a gun. I'm impervious to any. Now it's the GoPro or the camera mounted. They do things that, you know, but show the end results. Show that this guy did a flip, spun, and fell into the right spot of the water. But let's see some of those where the person falls and hits splatters and it's just ketchup on the rock that he missed the pond. Then we'd have a lot more caution, and people wouldn't be so eager to run out and buy a gun, because there are consequences. Even if you shoot someone, you're stuck with that mentally in your mind, and show how that person suffers for killing and taking another life.
Yeah.
But we treat it as if it's recreational. I've smoked out 3 people.
Sure, and he's automatically exonerated for having done that.
Yes.
Because at least in the fiction, he's painted as being on the moral high road. You know, the other thing is that people don't realize that, you know, the old story you mentioned before we began. So somebody trying to break into your house, you know, what are you going to do? Of course, you want the police there. You want them fully armed to protect you. But if they're not there, and these days you may find they're not there,
right,
because they don't want to get involved. So now you have a gun. This is not good advice, but you have a gun, and you blow that guy away, just like in the movies, and you kill him, okay, or wound him, and you think that's the end of it, and that you'll be automatically exonerated? No, the legal system doesn't necessarily exonerate you. Aside from having the guilt trip that you spoke of, you know, the psychological trauma of having wounded or killed another human being, you have the system looking at you. They may not think you're so great. You may wind up going to jail or being subject to a civil, judgment that would take your life apart.
Yeah.
It's not that simple.
Well, all of this crime and addressing crime can start with the judiciary system. The judges dictate a lot of the mindset of the police officers, because if you're going to arrest someone and then he's going to go in, and when you go to court, you're sitting there and the guy walks out with a minor fine, why would you as a police officer be so aggressive, and when in fact the public wants you to arrest this guy, but the reality is the person has a laundry list of violations that he's committed, and the police are standing there feeling helpless. So why would they be eager? And I'm not justifying their reluctancy to come. They will come. I've never met a policeman that wouldn't come to a crime scene. But we got to start revisiting the whole judicial system, because it's not consistent, number one. There's some injustices being dealt out at the hands of the judicial system. But if there was consistency, a revisiting and revamping of the judiciary system itself, the application of the rules, the laws, and the fines and penalties, you'd probably see a better reaction from the policeman.
Yeah, we have to make it our collective thing. Everybody has to be involved in the process. It's not we versus them.
Right.
And you mentioned two words before we began the show. One was training. They got to be better trained. They have to understand the Constitution. They have to understand the power and also the responsibility of carrying a lethal weapon with them, or even a semi-lethal weapon. And the other thing you mentioned was transparency, because, and I absolutely agree with this, the police department, they are all our agents. They are all public servants. They're working for us. We need to know to the maximum extent what they're doing out there. And we want to be connected with them. We want them to be connected with us. They got to be members of the community in every way. And we've lost out on that over the years, I think. I'm not sure why. It could be going back to the same thing about the movies and the television. Not only do those movies and television, the American new literature, if you will, portray violence as something, which doesn't hurt you, which is ridiculous. But also, they portray an us versus them kind of thing between the police and the public and the suspects and all that. And the result is that you go show after show, movie after movie, and what you get is this huge disparity between us and them, us and them. And I think the police take that to heart.
Now, there's two scenarios playing out here. When we turn on the TV, in 30 minutes, the crime is committed, and at the end of that 30 minutes, 25 minutes, it's solved. And everybody in the precinct is high-fiving. But the reality is, there are many cases that go uninvestigated. There are many cases go unresolved. I personally, last year, was assaulted in an attempt on my life.
You had a show on that with Kali'i Akina, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and let me tell you, as still today, there's not been a sensible investigation or meaningful investigation on it. So, again, I could take the mindset that, well, I got to go back and get even, or, it causes me self-help. And in fact, so this is something that the police systems and the judiciary system should be mindful of, because if they're lethargic in their efforts and their reactions and not making sure justice is preserved.
Or ignoring the victim.
Right. Then you're going to see a culture, a continuation of culture of violence. Some of us will sit there and say, well, it's not worth it not to get it. But there are some of us that believe that, I got to go get even. Strike a balance.
Because the authorities will not do that for me.
So it's all of this psychology that's coming into play that we need to address.
On a macro level, though, this idea of I don't trust the government. That's what we're talking about. I don't trust the government to protect me.
Right.
This is a pretty serious breach or perceived breach of the social compact that makes the country. And if we don't trust the government to protect us, this is a real big flaw in our relationship with government. And in a lot of these cases of violence that we've seen, you see that. You see the people who do the violence they're all mad at the government.
Right.
And the government is sort of a boob about this. It doesn't really act. It doesn't solve. Big investigation, but no result. This is a problem not only for the players in the violence, but for everyone watching, and we
Macho.
all watch.
Yeah, you see, machismo. And a lot of people are alleging that police departments are militarizing themselves, overpowering themselves with the tanks and all of that. But let me tell you, having been in law enforcement, unless you're there, you don't want to go there with unmatched firepower, because there are some people out there now have obtained weapons and so you don't want to subject that officer or any police officer to a danger that we wouldn't want to face. So we need to equip them. I mean, if they need fully automatic weapons, give it to them. But we need transparency and trust within the police department. This notion that, well, we have a list and we can't disclose how many people were penalized or punished this year in the police force.
No good reason for that.
I'm sorry. You're ripping at the very trust that have you in place.
Yeah. So, trying to be constructive about this, Carol, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Something in Congress, in the state legislature, in the police department? What do we do?
Every single element that is involved that dictates the current status, the judiciary system, we need to revisit that. The police departments, we need to revisit them and strip them of this practice of, rid them of this practice of, well, we have the privacy of the officer. Well, yes, privacy and constitutional rights is one thing, but in the performance of a duty, when there's questions, that needs to be addressed and revamped, that whole process. The public needs to be reminded that television, this violence that you see, it's mere entertainment. It's not reality. And there is a consequence and a cost. When you pull that trigger, at the receiving end is a human being, a life that is snuffed out. Not only the ones that suffer is the one that is killed, but the families and the financial cost that it brings on that family, the hardship. Maybe the breadwinner that was shot.
Often.
Yeah, quite often.
Yeah. Okay, we'll take a short break, and we're going to leave gun control right there, unresolved, because that's what it is. We're going to come back, and we're going to talk about climate change, a very interesting look at climate change, the unseen effects, and probably the public misunderstanding about climate change. That's Carroll Cox. He's with Carroll Cox Show, the Carroll Cox Show on KWAI 1080 AM, and we'll be right back for more of this discussion.
Aloha, I'm Kili'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to ThinkTech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
Okay, we're back, we're live. We're here with Carroll Cox of Carroll Cox Show, KWAI 1080 AM, here on ThinkTech. And we do take Twitter. And I want to look at our Twitter feed here because we had a Twitter from Mark Ward about the discussion a minute ago. And he says, thank you for the tweet, Mark. He says, in Chicago, the number of shootings here in Chicago in a weekend is greater than the annual number in many countries. That's the first part of his tweet. The second part, he says, if the victims were all white, it would be a different story. So, Carol, you want to comment? You want to respond to Mark Ward's tweet?
Well, I'm always concerned with racism, always. But I have one concern, that when we start to equate and define things as well, if they were white, it would be different. Not in this case. This is, what you're seeing is a cultural behavior this is how we, in these communities, resolve our questions. Pulling the old gun, resolving it. And some of the victims are not known to the shooter. Stray bullets, and some are just standing on the corner and they're just wantonly shooting. So that suggests that we have major problems both in how we deal in the black communities, how we deal with issues. And then maybe we need more police presentation or representation in those communities, because many of them are strapped for service and response time and what have you. And some police departments have this term, TNA, and I won't tell you what the N stands for, but when a police receives a call, it is stated over the air to the other units, no need to rush, this is TNA. So when we had that culture and this practice of policemen not rushing there and then undermanned or underrepresented in that community, you're going to have this kind of behavior.
We got to take a whole look, the whole thing, and make sure it works for everybody. Because I think with all this violence, violence is its own kind of terrorism, and people have, everybody has a reaction to what happened in the church last week and 2 weeks ago, and what happened in the recruiting center just yesterday, and people get afraid of that, and they change their behavior because of that. Maybe they go a little paranoid about that. And I don't know what the gun lobby does about it, but they take positions based on these horrendous events, and so does the anti-gun lobby take positions. So, the question is, how do we make everyone feel that government is protecting them?
Well, again, I don't want to give the impression that I agree with that the government is responsible. I haven't served in Chicago, worked in Chicago, lived in Chicago. I would submit this. I am more nervous of going to Chicago and these communities than I am going back in the heart of Mississippi, because they didn't just wantonly shoot you. Remember now, in Chicago, people are shooting one another because they're wearing the wrong color strings in their gym shoes, the wrong jacket, or looking at me, or you understand? So we must accept a responsibility, part of this responsibility. It isn't about how many whites would be shot and then we'd have an army of policemen. No, we, people, African Americans in the community, must own up to a greater portion of this, because we are the ones pulling the trigger. There's nobody, no matter what we're being presented with, we make that final decision. We need to raise our children a little different. We need to instill in them that violence will get you nothing but a visit to the jail and a long stay, or if you're lucky, you get shot and you get killed, and you don't have to suffer jail. But this kind of violence, and I know it's hard to take, and some will listen to me say this, having lived there and being an African American, we need to re-educate ourselves. It's not about what the government is failing to do. It is what we are doing when it comes to making that final decision, pulling that trigger. Who is telling? The government isn't saying, take this gun and turn it into a weapon and create violence and having elderly sleeping on the floor in the bathtubs to avoid stray bullets being shot. That's not the government.
Okay.
Yes.
Remind you, though, that a lot of these mass murders are being done by the Howley guys, not the black guys.
Yeah, but that's a different kind of act. But again, if we quantify it in race and we try to embroad and embellish it based on race, we'll never accomplish anything. Never.
That's why I say it's got to be a national effort.
Everybody involved must take ownership to their part in the contribution of this decay.
Including Congress.
Yeah, including
the anti-gun control lobby.
Yes.
Well, let's move on to our second topic, which I really find very interesting, and that is global warming. Global warming, not in the context of the ICC and all these international organizations, and come and tell us on various intervals that we've got a big problem. I mean, they did this week, I think, making comparisons against earlier periods and showing us that we had more bad storms and we had higher temperatures, that. But global warming in the day-to-day, person-to-person quality of life around the world, everyone, everywhere. You read in the paper that there's a bad storm, but the article never actually connects that with global warming. And you're left there holding the newspaper in your hand, wondering whether there's a connection. And in your heart there is a connection. but you're not sure because there's nobody standing alongside telling you, see, Jay, there's a connection. And I think as time goes by, we'll all draw our own conclusions, or some of us, will read the newspaper and make those conclusions. But a lot of people will not actually connect it. They don't realize, or they call it denial in the old psychological sense. They deny that this storm or this very hot, summer is actually part of global warming. And that denial is troublesome to me. And I wonder where and when somebody is going to get up and say, wait a minute, this is really happening, man. You got to do something. And there was a piece on NPR this morning about a science fiction writer. I didn't print it out, but a science fiction writer who's written a book that's just getting published, but he will be writing another book about the intersection of global warming and science fiction. And what happens. Because we haven't seen that painted. It's the same thing as when we talk about watching television and seeing a fictionalized kind of version of what doesn't happen after the violence. And here we know about global warming, sort of in this philosophical sense, the conceptual sense, but we don't really apply it to our own lives. What are we missing here, Carroll?
Well, to quantify it, we must, first of all, identify all of it, all the parts. There are many parts. So when someone says they're an expert on global warming, I tend to get a little uneasy because unless you understand the total complexity of this thing, for example, channelization, creating channels in the Mississippi to drain the water. So you're lowering the water table so plants that would normally be able to tap the roots and get water and, and live vibrant and reproduce and create coolness and, that whole process there. You remove that because the area now is dry and the channelization channels all the water away and into the ocean or into the river to go to the Mississippi and the Gulf. Here in Hawaii, everything is paved. How much water is percolating? Rainwater. It would normally percolate down through the ground and fill in the aquifers and the pores, and then the trees could survive.
That's
and
a
be
very
vibrant.
good question, Carroll.
You understand? So when we channelize everything and put pavements on parking lots and no percolation, that water then goes into the ocean. So to understand global warming, it is not one event, it's many. And so when that dirty water that runs off the non-point source pollution from the streets and the oil and the engine oils runs off into the ocean and it drifts in the eddies and in the currents, it acidifies the ocean. We don't see that. And we don't connect them all together. So when someone say we don't have global warming, maybe you're not awake because maybe you're having a nightmare. Because the reality is just our actions, daily actions as human beings, contribute to the decay and the decrease in the climate. If you go in an area where there are trees, it's tend to be cooler, right? But if there's asphalt and cement, guess what you have? An increased temperature. Mililani, where I live, is 10 degrees generally cooler. It's up in the upper elevations, but I believe a lot of that is influenced by the greenery there, opposed to the lack of greenery downtown here in Honolulu.
Just as you were speaking, I was thinking of this other comment this author made. He said he wanders through Manhattan with instruments that will tell him exactly where he is and how far above sea level he is. Because in his book that he's going to write, all of those buildings are going to be canyons in a Venice West, where it's all going to be underwater. And so, Manhattan will be Venice, but it won't be fun. And it won't support the same kind of human activity and business and life in general. And I think that's one of the elements here is that if you keep on deteriorating the structures of our community, the availability of water, the temperature. There was something recently about how they found that tropical fish were swimming off Alaska. What's going on here? And you mentioned trout. in California were affected. And lots of other species of all kinds are affected. Maybe they moved location, maybe they get sick, maybe they go extinct. But our lives are changing. And it's hard to look at one, maybe there is a place, but I don't know what it is, where you can say, well, okay, this is week number X, right? And these are all the things that happened this week that you should be concerned about. These are all the things that are going to affect your life. And of course, the bottom line is affect your life may be an understatement, because if climate change has the effect we think it's going to have, it is having, then the planet's environment will be broken, and the planet will not be able to support as many human lives as it does now. If we have 7 billion people living here, and the planet, as a matter of science, can only support 5 billion or 4 billion, a number of billion people have to go somewhere.
And that just their presence alone is a threat, but their consumption, so wanting a hamburger. Well, cows generate methane. Methane gets into the atmosphere and creates a warmth or presents a problem to the atmospheric conditions, right? But the urine and all of that waste, where does it go? We have a practice of seeing the ocean as a receptacle for trash, so we flush it out there. And these fish, like the salmon and the trout, the catadromous and anadromous fish that come and go and rely on, when they go out at the ocean there, it may be too acidic for them to survive, and their food sources decrease. So they're out there foraging, struggling, so you won't get the population that you were returning back upstream to replenish the population and propagate. Well, if we're dumping in the streams as well, the pulp mills and the paper mills and all of that, and allowing the oils and the sewage and the storm water runoff into the streams, these are the things that are contributing to global warming. We're not going to see it go off into the sky and the sky is going to change.
Won't be visible, right?
It's not visible in the sense as we see it, but the reality, it is all around us. If we don't stop and think and the practices, the ocean is not a receptacle for trash.
Yeah.
It's not. It is one of our major resources of food, resources, minerals, but we either overmine them or dump the sewage. And I mean, some of these sewage plants are not being treated. But a greater factor that's contributing, we have this practice of burning trash, the most archaic.
Hold on
process.
for 1 minute. I want to get to that. It's a new topic. It's worth some discussion. But first, a short break. That's Carroll Cox of the Carroll Cox Show, KWAI 1080 AM. And we're here talking about, what was it? Guns at climate change. We're in the climate change part now. We'll be right back.
Aloha, my name is Jim Sean, and I'm host of a show called Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. Each week, live streaming at noon on ThinkTech Hawaii, we interview people who have special insights into education, from early education through K-12, all the way through higher education and beyond. Both public and private are areas we're interested in. We dig deeper. We try to find out what it's really like to be involved in making change, advocating for it, how you reform, what people's philosophies are in reforming it. As I said, we're live streaming every Wednesday at noon on ThinkTech Hawaii. And later on, you can find these interviews on YouTube and on the Hawaii Educational Policy Center website. We hope you join us as many times as possible. Aloha.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Wait, we're going to start again. We get, you guys, you miss out on the best part. It's during the breaks, we get the real deal. This is Carroll Cox. I'm Jay Fidell. We're doing Community Matters because community does matter a lot, especially when you look at a world that might not have community. And we're talking about guns and climate change with Carroll today. So I guess the part where we left it off was Carroll was talking trash. Let's talk some trash, Carroll.
Yeah. Well, you want to start with the City and County of Honolulu's practice of burning trash. They install a new boiler. And that's the greatest solution to ridding ourselves of trash, But you can burn it, you're just changing it into a different form because you have emissions coming from the boilers, from the stacks. And where does that go? Into the atmosphere, but see, we live in an area where there's trade winds. And so, out of sight, out of mind. We put it in the air.
And we always say, oh, we got the cleanest air in the world.
The thousands and thousands of tons of emissions that we emit to the air, and it blows out.
Yeah.
And it eventually settles down or get into the air currents, and other countries may be picking up but acidity, acidic rains. And remember in the old days, way, way back when we first started talking about this, the greenhouse effect, whatever happened to that?
It wasn't that long ago, actually.
I'm saying, but we treated it because now it's global warming.
Yeah.
But in reality it's human behavior that's contributing to the demise and the decrease of quality of the environment. That's what it is. It's not global warming or acid rain or greenhouse effect. Remember, it was a greenhouse effect was the real concern, and then came acid rain, and they had videos, and all those are realities. But every 10 years, it seems, we reinvent some other, or coin some other phrase to stab at what is really going on in the decay.
That's one of the problems, you know. It's like people get distracted. The public, you know, the public body globally gets distracted. So we worry about climate change, and it's headline. And some government agency or global agency issues a report, it's headline. Everybody gets all excited about that. Next thing you know is we got a shooting in Tennessee. Everybody gets excited about that. And we forget about climate change. Somebody has to remind us about this, because this is the most important thing. When I do the math, I find billions of people missing from the planet. And I mean, we should talk about when that might happen. But the reality is this is the highest priority of all. This is the one that's creeping up faster than you might think.
I have this fear that we have given in to, we got technology and we can fix it. For example, we see the decrease in population of fish. So what's the solution? Have fish farms, right? What's associated with the fish farm? Well, antibiotics and all of those things associated with it, and chemicals and what have you. Why not preserve what we have and protect that? But we have this mindset that, you know, if we break it, we can fix it. And that's what we're going to fix ourselves into a corner, that even the fish that are uniquely raised in the farms will become susceptible to certain diseases.
Yeah, they're not exempt.
Yeah, exactly.
And these global climate change processes will affect them also.
Yeah.
You know, there's no reason to think they're the solution to what's happening in the wild. They're not really the solution. So, I mean, I think, you know, little by little, this is going to affect our water supply, our food supply, and our daily quality of life. And we won't be able to do the things we do now. We take so much for granted. I mean, this, you know, may I say, this could be, in terms of satisfaction of human needs and wants, it could be the best time of all. It could be the tipping point. It could be the peak. You know, where do we go from here, Carroll?
You know what I would tell you if you asked me how would I describe it? It's the beginning of the end. That I don't mean to be morbid about it, but at the way we're traveling and at the rate we're traveling, and having little respect for the planet and the conditions and the well-being of this planet, it's the beginning of the end. And we will be thousands of millions of years from now remembered, or may not even be remembered.
Right. Nobody will know.
We contributed to our own demise.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost a religious aspect to all of that, in the sense that we brought it upon ourselves. We could have saved ourselves, but we didn't think together. We didn't think for the common good. Everybody had an agenda, and nobody wanted to, you know, survive the planet, survive the civilization. So I put to you the same question I put to you before, and that is, with due regard for the possibility this could be the beginning of the end, and with the possibility that we really, at this point, we're beyond the tipping point, and in a larger sense, we may not be able to do anything about it. But let me make you president, okay?
You want another black president?
Why not?
I mean, look, man.
Go for it, man. So I'm making you president. Now I ask you, what are you going to do? How are you going to fix this? I give you powers. I give you any power you want. What are you going to do?
Well, I'd start by making sure and educating people about a plant-based diet. Starting to consume more plants in our diet. And that in itself will reduce the need for many of the water, thousands and thousands of gallons of water necessary to raise 1 pound of beef or grain and all of that intense farming. I would change the type of crops that we have. Would not go specifically one crop, cotton and corn and what have you. I would modify that and vary it and use various types of, that's where we need to have more vegetable or plant-based diet.
Would you make agriculture local?
Yes, yes, because when it's not local, you got to transport it. When you're going to transport it, you got to fill up the tank, and when you got to fill up the tank, you got to pump oil, and and suck oil from the ground, and all of that. It's only common sense, but we have made it where the mass farming practices, okay, and then so all of that shipping and what have you contributes to the cost as well as the quality, diminishes the quality of
But
life.
can we support the same, this goes back to my notion about population. Can we support the same population doing this? Because, when you do it on a mass basis, by economies of scale, it's cheaper, more efficient, if you will. You may not get the same quality of agriculture, and you may, have an effect on climate change, but at least you feed the people. If you go local and you're not efficient or as efficient, and maybe you're not providing the same level of protein that humankind needs, maybe you can't support the same population anymore.
Well, I don't believe that the same population could sustain itself the way we have now. And that's what we need to do. I don't
Okay.
think we should go to the process that China went, where singling out boys but we need to start thinking about making smaller families. But remember, in the older days, we had large families too, and that's what as a result, we have a large population of people. So as a president, I wouldn't dictate how many you would have, but I would have education based on the concerns for the impacts that humans have on the earth and the planet's atmosphere and the conditions and all of that. That's where I would start. But plant-based diet, and I lived in a rural part of Mississippi. We had truck patches. We grew peanuts and potatoes, sweet potatoes, red potatoes. We grew okras, and we canned and all of that.
Local agriculture.
Oh, local. And it was there. And then come wintertime, we didn't have berries being trucked in from Chile and bananas and all that. We relied on the peaches that we canned during the summer months or the spring that we harvested and purchased by the bushels, processed them, the beans and the greens, and we processed those, and we had a pantry filled with canned foods that we canned. It wasn't in the can with the can opener, but we canned them. It's possible. It was doable, but we've gotten away from that, you see. So we need to modify our entire lifestyle.
Yes, and it's another show, but in order for us to get from where we are to the picture you're painting, is we probably need to reorganize our way of doing government and our way of handling special interests and our way of doing capitalism and all that. I mean, it has all kinds of secondary effect. Anyway, always stimulating to talk to you, Carroll. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
All right, thank you for having me.
Yeah, as always, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.